welcome to the Casuals Runeterra, a very special start to a very special series. We're talking about Arcane Season 2 finally. I am your host, Ryan. Here's the other host, Hedge.
I'm not the other host this time. I am once again returning to my role as the conductor of the hype train. Let's go, Season 2. I've waited so long. Let's go.
Props to Riot and Fortiche for the 2-year turnaround. Big deal. We appreciate it. It's been a wait, but it's a shorter wait than I think most people expected. Let's just hop into it. Housekeeping up top. You know it. You love it. You can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Remember, that's podcast COR. Follow us on all the platforms and then leave a like and comment wherever you choose to listen. And as always, word of mouth has gotten us this far. So tell a friend to mistakenly attribute the actions of few to the many by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
That's one of the more ominous housekeepings that
We're talking about Arcane here, man.
Oh man. And like we knew as far as like for season 2 that it was time to buckle up and strap in, but like they wasted no time. But
Yeah, and before we get into it, we want to, there's a few changes up top. So if you're an OG listener and you remember 2 years ago when Arcane Season 1 came out and we did a blitz in which, as you may know, it's released, 3 episodes every weekend for 3 weekends, which I like that release structure. It's unique. But we decided to do all 3 episodes, watch all 3 episodes, record all 3 episodes, post all 3 episodes in that weekend. And it was a nightmare. It was great for content, for you all, but for us, it's just not feasible in this new future we live in. So we just want to say up top that our plan for this specific series, this season, since it's released in the same structure, is we're going to do 1 a week. So you should be seeing for the next couple weeks each episode coverage coming out. And we hope, that doesn't mean you have to watch 1 episode and wait for our next episode, right? Go ahead and do your binging. Enjoy the series. Yeah. But then come listen to us talk about it. If you just like hearing our voices, if it comforts you.
Yeah, like we have grown, and part of growing is getting older. And frankly, we are not ready to pull those all-nighters again. But if you do enjoy, our take on it, or if you just want to listen to us be idiots, come check us out, because we'll be putting that content out regularly. It's just going to be a lot slower than last time.
Yeah.
And either way, even though we're not staying up all night to do it, we're still just as excited. I know I'm just as excited because, man, it's already just right out of the gate, super good. But we'll wait until we actually talk about the show before I dive into that.
Yeah, and one other thing for our listeners is that our regular scheduled programming, the rest of the lore, there's still plenty of it to go through. We'll get back there, but it is going to be a while of some Arcane stuff, just for a little something special. So what you'll probably end up hearing is episodes we've recorded already that come out, we recorded before this, that come out after this. Just ignore it. It's still good fun. We try not to time box ourselves too much in the content, but there may be something here or there.
Yeah, and it's going to be hard as far as not time boxing ourselves in an election year, because we may or may not every now and then kind of point to where our political ideologies go.
Yeah.
But who knows? Who knows? Maybe we'll do okay this time.
And we're about to talk about season 2 of Arcane. There may be some current events that the smart people will be able to draw a direct analogy between the two. But let's get into it. Let's start off with the new opener. Same song, but new animation, and dude, it's cool.
Dude, the animation for the opening is really good, and it definitely gives the feeling that Riot has been saying, where it's we're going to hang on to the Arcane, not necessarily the Arcane title, but we're going to hang on to this format and continue making more shows like this. And so like seeing the animations for the opener really kind of set that in of just like, okay, cool. Like this is it. Like this is what the show is going to be like moving forward. But all that said, the fact that it's still the same song pissed me off as an anime fan.
Yeah,
Like, no,
same.
I watched 12 episodes. I'm supposed to get the new opener.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be in Japanese.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be in
Where-
Japanese.
Where's my obscure Japanese rock band?
I want Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas blazing in my ears by now. Like, how dare you? But I mean, like, I get it. Like, they probably had to shell out a hefty sum for the song in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, we're gonna get our money's worth. So watch it again. But yeah, the opener's great.
Yeah, and that takes us into let's start talking about the story. We're gonna move through it. If you've noticed, these episodes are slightly shorter than last season. I think last season you were like in the 40 to 45 minute range per episode. This is about 30 to 35. And it moves because the content is also a lot more packed due to where we are in the narrative. But all good stories are told in 3 parts. So we start with part 1, where episode 1 starts with the aftermath of season 1 or of season 1 where we left off. And we have 3 of the council members dead because Jinx shot a rocket into a council meeting. And that left 3 remaining members alive, Mel, Jace, well, quote unquote Jace, Sallow, and Shula.
Yeah, Shula.
Yeah, Shula being the other one. And in addition, Victor is in a coma from this blast as well, since he was in attendance, and Jace is rushing him off to his lab, trying to seek some hex tech solution, which, I mean, I think we know how that's going to go.
Yeah. So as far as with him like rushing off to the lab, like this whole scene was shot kind of like, to me, it reminds me of the Saving Private Ryan storming of Normandy.
Yep.
With Tom Hanks' character being shell shocked. It has that feel to it, which is perfect because it's like we're watching this through Jace's eyes, even though it's not first person view.
Yeah.
But and so of course he's going to be shell shocked. He was directly in the room that got blown up.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it sets the stage for how we're going to see how Jace reacts to all of this later on. And so we have him running down the hallway to the lab, and then it's like him looking for a solution, and the solution kind of finds him.
Yeah.
And not necessarily that it's like the solution finds him. It's more of just like, that here's an opportunity and
Yeah.
I'm desperate. And so now Victor ends up kind of being bound with the hex core. Like we just have this shot of Jace holding the hex core near Victor until he can't hold it anymore.
Yeah.
So the implications of the scene is crazy to me because as far as for Victor's lore, it's always been like Victor trying to improve his body, which we got to see in season 1. And it was just, they didn't understand enough for him to fully be able to use it as a solution for himself. But in the lore, it's always been Victor doing this to himself until he becomes more machine than man. This kind of changes the implications of that because now, like, Victor didn't have a choice in that.
Yeah.
He wasn't conscious. It was a desperate Jace just trying to save his friend. So I'm curious to see as far as what if the lore is going to end up changing up for Victor's initial descent into the Great Revolution.
Yeah.
Who knows? Like, so the implications of this scene is actually pretty high, a lot higher than what the show is actually giving credit for right now, because we're not worried about Victor. We're worried about Piltover and how the council is going to bounce back from this.
Yeah. And this takes us to another shot where we then have the funeral for the dead council members, and that's including Caitlyn's mom, which is a big deal. Because not only is it Caitlyn's mother, but it's also she's the head of the council at that point, and also her family is one of the main, contributors to a lot of things. So that being said, after this funeral, the council then gathers And Counselor Sallow kind of takes the lead, and he's demanding that the council responds to this attack in full force in Zon. And he wants to use enforcers to essentially occupy and suppress all Zonites. And he refers to them, and this is a big deal, as we've seen, in our current timeline in the real world. He starts to refer to them less of Zonites and just starts calling them creatures and demons and animals. And this is usually a common theme when it comes to like dehumanizing a whole population to justify violating their human rights. And Mel immediately catches on to this because Mel is our character that's supposed to be the moral compass in this situation. And she immediately resists the idea, reminding the council and her mother, because Ambessa is constantly, this is one, as far as the early episodes, in this episode specifically, Ambessa's there, and she has a presence because she's massive. She's a muscle mommy, but also just because of her demeanor and how imposing she is. But she doesn't have much dialogue for a while. And she's just there, and she's kind of responding with her face. And, Silco is dead, Mel says, and Jinx is the only one responsible for what happened. And she reiterates that to make sure that it's said out loud. And I commend her for that. And the council agrees. So then they come to a kind of middle ground. Like, okay, let's put together a small strike force without the use of excessive force or hex tag. And that's what Mel's doing to put her foot down. And Sallow kind of gives in and says, whatever, let's just get something started.
Yeah, and this scene actually has a lot of I think this is really building the stage for what is going to be Ambessa's presence and her effect in Piltover here.
Mhm.
And because we're really getting to see the beginning in this scene for what I believe is like Ambessa's real goal here, which she kind of alluded to in season 1 as well, that like Noxus is interested in the weaponry, like the potential weapons that Hextech can become. So for her, this conflict is kind of perfect because, like, hey, the more pressure you guys are under, the more likely you are to turn Hextech into weaponry.
Mhm.
And we are very interested in that. And as far as the council, Sallow is really pushing for the invasion. And Mel puts her foot down specifically on the hex tech because she recognizes that the invasion is going to happen, period.
Yeah.
So she puts her foot down on the hex tech. And that's really the only time that we get to see Ambessa give a reaction to what is happening in this exchange amongst the council. Like, Ambessa does seem kind of disappointed that the council ends up hitting a majority agreement, because Shula is also on board for no Hextech weapons, which is funny because it's like we have to talk about Shula since there's no other council members now because of the attack. But Shula also has such a little presence in all of the scenes, including this one, despite the fact that she's basically the swing vote.
Yeah.
But like,
and was also injured in the blast out of the three. Sallow.
There was
lost the use of his legs.
And that's actually something that we didn't touch on. The only person in the room that wasn't injured from the blast is Jace. And that's important when we talk about Jace later. Jace is the only one that wasn't injured.
No,
Mel was caught under something. She was knocked out.
Yes. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, the show starts off with her with Jace waking her up.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's no council members here means that Shula is playing an important role despite having zero presence. But once she lays her vote down that there should be no Hextech weaponry, Ambessa actually breaks her poker face for a second and is kind of upset by this. So I think that is, that kind of plays into more like what Ambessa's goal is here, which is to get Hextech weapons, or at least that's what I'm convinced of at this point.
Yes. So this takes us to part 2, and we shift to more of the character focus on Caitlin as she's grieving the loss of her mother. She does this with her father in a beautiful scene, as far as how it's composed. And then Vi appears towards the end, upsetting her father for being there. But Caitlin is, receptive to it. And Caitlin lets Vi know what's going on, kind of lets her know what the council's plan is, and then she says, I want you to join as an enforcer to help us carry this out. And obviously, Vi immediately rejects that idea because we all know the past. We saw it in season 1, and she leaves and ends up spending the night drinking under a bridge with some random unknown grizzled enforcer. The guy we've seen from the trailer.
Yeah, as far as like, this is a great reveal as far as for that guy, despite the fact that we still know nothing about him.
Yeah.
Like, even like spoilers for the end of this episode, we still know nothing about him. They give us nothing other than the fact that he's just getting absolutely blitzed with Vi.
Yeah.
But the whole scene, as far as Caitlin grieving with her dad, like, is a well-written scene, but like visually it's a gorgeous scene too.
Yeah.
Like, they did a great job as far as really setting the mood with the animation there. And then when we get to the conversation with Caitlin and Vi, like, this is really starting to show like how much stress they're both under, because a lot of their conversation is both of them just giving knee-jerk reactions to each other, which makes sense. They just went through a very traumatic event because, yeah, sure, they weren't in the blast where the council was, but they were tied up to chairs watching the terrorists do this. Like, they watched the whole thing happen. So it makes sense, but it's kind of a hard conversation to watch because you just kind of want both of them to calm down. And it's like you both care about each other. You don't have to do this to each other. Like, we can all take a breath. And they're not taking a breath. Vi's going off to get blitzed. Okay.
Classic.
Next scene.
Listen, you saw the neck tats. You know what's going to happen. So this takes us to now Jace, and Jace back where he finally stabilizes Victor, puts him in a comatose state, and Mel appears to give him essentially the first opportunity to grieve the situation, because he is most vulnerable with Mel, as we found out in season 1. And Mel ends up asking him, hey, can you check in with Caitlin and all this, because I know you've been going through stuff, but she's also in a very precarious situation. And he agrees, and he goes to meet Caitlin in a park, and they start to share thoughts on just the whole situation.
And like, this is a good scene because you know, it's two very close friends who just went through something horrible, and this is the first time for either of them that they can both just kind of have that feeling of that it is possible to return to normal, and that is translated really well in this scene. But as far as like with Jace grieving with Mel, all of that was too distracting by just the image of Victor's comatose state, because good lord, like,
in his Cthulhu pool.
Like, you know, he's doing a spawn pull at 12, Zergling Baneling rush, and he just listen, like every good Zerg player, he turned himself into the structure.
Yeah, we have our, you know, meters here. We use our spectrums, and it's on the very Warhammer side.
Man, this is as close to like to a servitor being created that I think that Riot is willing to go down the path. But man, the whole what is going on with Victor is very much on brand for the Grimdark.
Yeah,
and it's so funny because we're having to grieve this terrorist attack in Piltover against the biggest political parties in all of Piltover. So we have no time to even address it. Like, no one's even talking about how absolutely horrific it is, because it's like, Jace, can you go talk to Caitlin? She's putting on a brave face, but she needs a friend. Like, there's a literal spawning pool on the wall next to you. But no, you want me to go check on Caitlin? Okay. Yeah, I'll go check on Caitlin.
And this scene is immediately juxtaposed with our first scene of levity, which is we go back to by being drunk the next morning in like hang out in a fountain just laid out with this other enforcer guy. And these two young enforcers come up and they find her and she immediately is like, oh, fucking cops, right? But there's two young enforcers, one being Maddie Nolan and the other one being an unnamed Vistian soldier. And they tell Kate, or she tells her that, you know, she's excited about Caitlyn's pitch to the Force, that she's going to be joining them on their excursion into Zon to, you know, take down the guys who did this. Very, you know, wide eye, bushy tail whippersnappers that don't really understand what's being proposed here. But the enforcers across Piltover know Vi, obviously due to her prison time. She's well known in her uniqueness. But she also mentioned something Vi didn't know, is which that Caitlyn essentially threatened to pull funding from the enforcers if they did not let Vi join. And this creates it's remember, this is the moment of levity. This is the comedy section. And that little footnote kind of lets you know, oh no, that's a bad step when you have one of the most wealthiest, influential families that back the leading enforcer, and she's now in a mental state where she's thinking about things like just pulling funding, because if she doesn't get her way, then you don't get your money. And we've seen how that plays out in the real world.
Yeah, like, you know, all these parallels to the real world are getting really scary. Especially since, you know, like the council was just like the scene, just a handful of scenes before this is the council really discussing a major police force push into the slums. So, like, now we know that one of the higher ranking officers is now in charge of the treasury for it too, because she could just be like, no, you do this or I won't pay you.
Yep.
Like, absolutely scary.
Listen,
and it's very funny that we get that in the comedy scene. Now, one of the other cool things about this is that not only, like you said, do the enforcers know who Vi is because of her prison time, but with the two fresh face recruits, or specifically Nolan, who is really the face of the rookie for the rest of this episode, that we get to learn that there's stories about Vi and Jace's adventure into the Shimmer Labs in season 1 that are circulating amongst the enforcers specifically, which is interesting to see because, like, we even get a reaction from our unknown enforcer who's hung over with Vi. We actually get a reaction from him when it's like, oh, they're actually talking with her to confirm if she actually did that stuff with Jace. So she's already has a reputation as far as for what we know as enforcer Vi. Because again, like, we know from the lore that that's what ultimately happens, but those stories are already spreading, and it's interesting that they're spreading through specifically the incursion in season 1, because that didn't go well. Like,
a big factor.
Like, they got the shimmer, but they lost a bunch of enforcers and a lot of innocent lives in it too.
Yeah, the main one being the killing of a child laborer.
Yes. And which ultimately was when Jace was like, yeah, I'm not making weapons. So it was not a successful venture, but the enforcers are already like, dude, we heard about that. You're a badass, which is like it's such a story that's as old as time, of like the rookies are very eager to get into conflict and the veterans are like, you don't understand how bad it is.
Exactly. And this then takes us to a memorial. So we had the funeral, now we're having a memorial for the council, in which they built a statue and they're preparing to reveal it to a crowd of, you know, denizens. And Mel is giving a speech alongside the remaining council. And there's some suspicious figures moving throughout the crowd, one being an enforcer with a very suspicious neck tattoos. And if you know our, once again, real world, when you see cops with neck tattoos and their ties to gangs and things like that, there's, you know, plenty of precedents for that. And she immediately is like, something's going on. She starts to follow him a bit until she's stopped by some other enforcers. And then suddenly Shimmer Reavers appear and they start attacking council members again. And this is a different type of shell shock to end this, part two here, is
Yeah.
because the first attack was unexpected. Obviously, they're on edge for this one, but it happening so soon after, they don't even have time to be scared. They're now all pissed and they begin to fight back immediately because they're like, we thought this was just a Jinx situation. Why are the Reavers here when Silco's dead?
Yeah, and on that note, because yes, the Shimmer Reavers appear, but it's not only Shimmer Reavers because the big reveal, as far as with this fight, is that the person attacking Jace is not just a Shimmer Reaver; it's
Oh, yep.
Rennie,
Yep.
who is one of the Kim Barons.
Yep.
Like this isn't a small figure for Zaun. We're talking about one of Silco's peers that is attacking.
Yeah.
And also, Rennie, like flashback to season 1 real quick, the child laborer that was killed in that attack that Jason Vi had is Rennie's son.
Yep.
So Rennie's out for revenge and she's the one leading this attack.
Yeah.
So this isn't just a renegade small group. We're talking about a very powerful figure in Zaun launching an attack and a powerful figure who did not agree with Silco and Jinx.
Yep.
Which everything that we've known to this point of this is a Jinx problem is officially out of the window, and that's what's taking us to part 3.
Yeah, and part 3 starts off with some Sakuga. A lot
Let's
of
go.
it. Money was spent, and it's essentially Vi, Caitlyn, and Jace fighting for their lives. The enforcement duo is there, and the enforcement duo is focused on trying to get the council members safely in a cab, getting them out of there, and fending off some Reavers there. And then suddenly, multiple of the final attackers are struck down by Ambessa and her close guard that's been walking around with her, a close guard of Noxian soldiers. You can't miss him. He's massive. I mean, Ambessa's massive, and this guy's twice her size, and he's always lurking in the shadows behind him with his buzz cut.
Yeah.
and war wounds.
He looks like a diet Darius.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. Which is a scary sight.
That is
Darius is probably
horrifying
bigger
sight.
than him.
Yeah. But and this actually does a great job of really kind of setting apart like Piltover and Noxus.
Yes.
Because we don't like the only bits of Noxus that we get in the show is Ambessa and her entourage.
Yeah.
And we have a whole couple minutes of Jace and Caitlyn and Vi fighting for their lives, the enforcers desperately trying to keep the council members alive. And let's face it, they're not doing the best job. Not to say anything as far as just like downplaying their skills. It's just they're under-equipped and underprepared to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then Ambessa and the Noxians are just like, flip the switch, game. Like, that was it. Like, It was just snap of fingers, it's over.
Yeah.
So it really sets the stage of like, one of these is a war-like nation trying to conquer Runeterra, and the other one is just a bunch of nerds. Guess
Nerds
which
with
is
money.
which? Nerds
tech.
with money.
Tech. Quote unquote. Yeah, so then this takes us back to Caitlyn's point of view, and she's enraged by this second attack, right? And finally, she's starting to slowly begin to side with Sallow's original idea. And Vi changes her mind as well, seeing Caitlyn start to take that little like teeter on the edge to the point where, remember at the beginning I said that they were referring, or Sallow was referring to them as creatures and demons. And Caitlyn kind of catches herself about to do the same, right? About to start dehumanizing them in her mind. And Vi's like, I'll join you. I'll help you do this, because she wants to be kind of the shackles on Caitlyn in this situation. And she's very tuned into her emotionally because of the relationship.
Yeah, and this is a huge step, because the last time that they actually talked about, Vi actually joining the Force, one, Vi didn't know everything that Caitlyn did to get her the ability to be on the Force.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the last thing that was pointed out was why would I join the enforcers? They killed my parents.
Hmm.
Eh, but this kind of is showing how much Vi cares for Caitlyn, because it's like, yeah, just to make sure that you are okay and you stay who you are now, I'll go with you.
Yep.
So it's
And
heavy.
it kind of snaps Caitlyn out of it, right? Because she's happy to hear that. So then we find out we have a scene where Caitlyn has a key that was given to her by her mother, and it was left to give her access to a computer, which seems rare in this world. Now that I think about it, but she has access to a computer and some secret information that only her family has access to, due to their status in society. And that's an interesting scene because she's scrolling through these files. We don't know what it means yet, but it's a lot, and it definitely pertains to something Piltover or Zon related.
Yeah, like we definitely get to see like images that are akin to the old plague masks from like the Black Plague in the real world.
Hmm.
And we know that face masks and specifically like rebreathers are very important for the survival of Zon.
Hmm.
And so it seems that the Kimmerin name is involved in this somewhere. But I like, kudos to the animators here as far as for like showing all the documents
Hmm.
and clearly not an English writing,
Hmm.
so that way it's like like I was staring at it like, okay, what can I pause on to get deeper meaning here?
Yeah.
And there's nothing.
Well,
Like
I'm fluent,
it's,
so I could have just told you.
man, screw you.
Yeah, it's a great scene, and also because it is one of the first times we get to see technology. Like, hey, here's a computer, right? Because you would expect them to have that, even though the core is kind of steampunky in Piltover. But then this takes us to kind of wrap things up for the episode, where now the council, after 2 attacks, has decided, you know what, fuck it, we're moving underground to our bunker. And Caitlyn appears with a task force, and it includes Vi, the guy she was drinking with, and the 2 enforcers, the 2 young enforcers, and they're all now wearing Hex Tech gear made by Jace. And we even get a shot, like it's intercut with a shot of Jace making these new weapons, and he's in agony while making them because, as Hetch mentioned, he promised never to make weapons again. And Caitlyn states 3 objectives to this stun council because Sal doesn't like her being there, and she reminds him, know your place. I'm in charge of the military, essentially. Fuck off, right? And she's like, there's 3 objectives here. We find Jinx, we stop the Shimmer trade, and we remove all agents loyal to Silco. And if you are a fan of history in the real world like we are, you know those 3 objectives are very common, and it never turns out well.
No, that is not true. That is not true that they never turn out well. The war on drugs was a massive success. And we totally stopped feeling the effects of the war on drugs in 2003.
Yeah, all gangs are gone.
And
there are no drugs.
all gangs. Oh,
and
God.
there are no more leaders.
Like it is crazy just how many different American launch operations specifically,
Yeah.
that you could just point at, and you could probably boil them down to, we're going in, we have 3 objectives.
Like Caitlin's like, here's your
Disgusting.
CIA list, your
Yep.
CIA grocery list. So, and Bessa watches this quietly, and once again, inverse to her response at the beginning, she's intrigued by Caitlyn's shift, and she can sense it because she has that military intuitiveness that most people don't have because of the Nation of Noxus, and she is a very high figure in that military structure. So Mel, it then cuts from her to Mel's reaction, which is complete shock because she just realized she lost all control, and she knows what this is going to result in because Mel is a well-written political character when it comes to that kind of centrist figure that tries to find the balance and ultimately gets dragged down into the military muck.
Yeah. And it's really important to point out, as far as the like Mel's reaction and Mbessa's reaction, both of these are after the reveal of not only the task force, but the fact that the task force is armed with hex tech.
Yep.
So for Ambessa, hey, they did it. We got hex tech weapons. I get to see what this shit can do.
Yep.
For Mel, it's not only that she's lost all control, but the last time she talked to Jace was not going to make weapons.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, here are 5 friggin' weapons in front of her.
Yeah, it's a great scene. And this takes us to
good.
What ostensibly these last 2 notes are. They would be post-credit scenes, but they're not post-credit. The first one is we get a shot of Victor in his coma, just a full-on front shot, and then we get his face start twitching, which shows signs of life outside of the comatose state he was in, and that's
And the
followed
spawn
by.
pool.
Sorry.
Yeah, outside of his comatose state and the spawn pool.
Oh yeah,
state.
the spawn pool, and then that's followed by a shot of a injured Singed or Dr. Singed, walking through a snowy wilderness where he's tracking down some unknown beast with some of the tech that we know he has from the game. What is he up to? And those post-credit scenes become a theme in these early episodes, and that's how we wrap up episode 1 of season 2.
And it is such a cool way to wrap it up, not only because of like there's no telling for the average viewer, there's no telling what's going on with Singed here, but with the kind of beast that he's tracking, longtime fans of the game series kind of have an idea where that could potentially go. So it's very exciting to see if that's where it ends up going. But also the scene with Victor, the transition to actually looking at Victor to see the signs of life is Jace finishing up his work, looking at Victor before he leaves the lab. And this just kind of sets the stage for like where Jace is right now, because he's not involved with the council at all. He's just trying his best to keep Victor alive, trying his best to help out his friends and the people that he cares about. And in the process of doing this, he breaks a promise to himself and a promise to his comatose friend in front of said comatose friend. Like, he finishes his work on the Hextech weapons and looks directly at Victor like, it's like, this
Life
just shows how much...
hard.
It's so hard. I'm so tired. He's already just looks so defeated. And
it's episode 1.
This is episode 1.
So this is the part of the episode where we do, a lengthy discussion, but we want to we're going to make this one shorter. Or we want to keep these short and contained so you guys can really listen to them quickly as you watch or whatever. So we're going to leave it there. Let us know in the comments how you enjoyed episode 1. What were your thoughts on episode 1? Even if you got, ahead of us as we're releasing these, we want to know what your thought process was during those time frames, because it's always good to hear how the viewer mentally is progressing with the story as it's unfolding. And if you had some predictions that you got right with some friends, we would like to hear those as well.
Yeah. And on that note, like, if in case like you missed it at housekeeping, legitimately go watch the show. Like, don't wait on us, because we're really taking our time with it, because we like the show. We want to take our time and enjoy it.
Yeah.
If we're going to enjoy it, you need to go enjoy it too. So go watch the show and then come back. Like, we'll still be here. We'll still be talking about it, because it's all like episode 1 was fantastic and it's only getting better. So like, holy cow, Bryant has done a great job with Arcane, and it's impressive that they're still meeting the expectations that we had, because we've been pretty vocal. We had high expectations.
Yeah. This is something we mentioned, and then we'll wrap it up, is that with season 1, I don't think we'll ever meet that level of excitement again and fulfillment, because no one expected it to be that amazing, right? It's now officially one of the greatest animated shows ever. when you look at any ranking. And that was something no one went into it thinking. So it adds something to that experience. This one, now you have that title. Can you defend it? And it's meeting the expectations. And that's good to see so far. So with that, thanks for listening. And we'll be back a couple more times with some more Arcane Season 2 episodes.
Let's go. Take care, everybody.